What comes to mind when you hear the phrase, the world's biggest coffee chain? Chances are, most of you immediately picture that green mermaid, the iconic Starbucks logo, and fair enough. This coffee giant with more than 50 years of history has dominated the globe. But in China, something almost unthinkable happened. A local company managed to outpace Starbucks on its own turf. And not by a little, but by a mile. Even though Starbucks had bet big on winning China, what followed became nothing short of legendary. The Great Chinese Coffee War. Hi, I'm Blake. Let's rewind to January 1999. Starbucks, the iconic brand with half a century of history, opens its very first location in Beijing. And almost immediately, it's clear. They've struck gold. Chinese consumers love the concept, both the grab-and-go culture and the chance to relax in a stylish, cozy environment. At first, Starbucks entered the Chinese market through a joint venture with two local partners. Each of them owned exactly 50% of the business. But by 2017, the U.S. headquarters had grown so confident in its success that it made the biggest acquisition in its history, buying out the remaining half of the China operation for $1.3 billion. From that point on, 100% of Starbucks locations in China were directly managed by the U.S. corporate office. For comparison, in the U.S., only about 60% of stores are company-owned. The rest are franchises. Keep that ratio in mind. We'll come back to it later. Starbucks saw this as the path to massive success. They believed that by controlling the Chinese market directly, they could grow it into something even bigger than their U.S. business. Total dominance in the Asia-Pacific region was the long-term goal, and they were making consistent moves towards that vision. And then, 2018, a bold new player enters the market, Luckin Coffee. Young, ambitious, and fearless. From the very first year, the company experienced exponential growth. And by the end of 2018, it had generated $2 billion in net profit. Or at least that's what I'd say, if this were an alternate reality. The truth was much harsher. Between 2018 and 2020, Luckin was bleeding cash at an incredible rate. In year one, $230 million in losses. In 2019, another $450 million gone. And in 2020, a staggering $860 million in the red. That's nearly $1.5 billion in losses in just 3 years. Not exactly a dream startup story, huh? It looked like the end. A bold idea crashing into reality. But Luckins' founders weren't aiming to be just another coffee chain. Their original pitch was something else entirely. We're a tech-driven IT company, and we're here to disrupt the coffee industry. And their approach? Definitely unconventional. Instead of following Starbucks' traditional coffee shop model, Luckin ditched the idea of seating areas altogether. No tables, no chairs. This allowed them to slash rental costs by opening small, high-efficiency pickup stores. And there was another key innovation. Baristas didn't take orders or handle payments. Everything from ordering to payment was done through the app. Staff didn't waste time on cash registers or customer flow. They could focus entirely on making coffee. This allowed Luckin to drive prices not just down, but way down. We're talking record low prices, even by fast coffee standards. On paper, Luckin's strategy looked bulletproof. It offered a rare trifecta: quality, accessibility, and convenience. Exactly the pillars their brand was built on. It sounded like the perfect formula. So what could possibly go wrong? If you've got a model that delivers everything customers want, why was the company hemorrhaging money? Well, Not everything was as smooth as it seemed. Luckins' marketing was aimed at people who use coffee as a functional part of their day, to wake up, stay focused, push through. And for them, price was far more important than, say, ambience or flavor. In the early days, that worked to Luckins' advantage. Their drinks were significantly cheaper than Starbucks. That price gap was the deciding factor for many. The plan was simple. Get people in with low prices, win their loyalty with quality and speed, and then gradually start raising prices. To support that long-term vision, Luckin initially sold coffee at nearly below the cost. New customers were offered free drinks. Regulars got discounts, sometimes up to 80% off. Here's how that played out in numbers. An Americano at Luckin costs around $1.40. At Starbucks, $4.50. A difference of more than 3 times. Sounds insane, right? Until you look at the financials. And then it all starts to make sense. Because the truth was, Luckin's pricing model just didn't work. Even as their consumer base exploded, the business was burning through cash faster than it came in. Here's why. Every dollar they earned was pretty much split in half. One part went to pay salaries, the other went to materials. Coffee beans, milk, disposable cups, and so on. Everything else, delivery logistics, R&D, marketing, product development, was not priced into the drinks at all. Those costs came directly out of Luckin's pocket. And if your core product doesn't cover its own costs, that's a ticking time bomb. Between 2018 and 2020, Luckin's margins weren't just thin. They were deeply negative. To earn $1, they were often spending $3. It was a financial suicide mission. But still, the company's leadership insisted it's all part of the plan. They even had a name for it, the loss leader strategy. The idea? Sell coffee at a loss. Hook customers on the product, slowly raise prices. And it might have worked, if not for one critical flaw. Luckin's entire business was built on utility. Cheap coffee, anytime, anywhere. And their marketing reinforced that image. In early ads, a man with a fresh cup of Luckin coffee would swoop in to rescue tired office workers or stressed out students. That became the core audience. Office employees and college students, people who didn't care about taste or atmosphere, just price. So what happened when Luckin tried to raise prices? People left fast. Their already fragile business model began to crack. And that's when Luckin's leadership made what seemed like the only logical decision. They started faking the numbers. Wait, what? How do you fake sales at that scale? Easy. Remember, every single transaction went through the Luckin app. There were no third-party point-of-sale systems, no independent records. That meant it was incredibly easy to pad the stats, tweak a few numbers here, inflate a few orders there, and voila! The company looked healthier than it really was. Until it all came crashing down. In 2020, the truth finally surfaced. It turned out that $732 million in reported revenue had been completely fabricated. The fraud was orchestrated by Luckin's founder, Lu Zhengyao, and then CEO Qian Jia. Both were removed in disgrace. And just like that, the original architects of Luckin's rise were gone. 2 shadowy figures fading into the background. So what happened to the company? Well, the leadership team was replaced. The stock collapsed down 97%. Customers vanished. It looked like the end of the road. But it wasn't. A new management team stepped in. And, spoiler alert, this is where the real Luckin comeback story begins. Over the next 3 years, Luckins' new management pulled off the impossible. They didn't just clean up the mess left behind by the original founders. They turned the company into one of the fastest growing and most profitable coffee chains in the world. So, how did they do it? It started with a principle so basic it's taught in every intro to business class. Profit equals revenue minus costs. Simple, right? If you want to boost profit, you can either increase your revenue or cut your costs. Ideally, you do both. That's exactly what the new team set out to do. Sure, it sounds obvious, but anyone who's ever run a business will tell you, changing just one of those things is hard. Changing both, that's a full-blown turnaround. So let's start with costs. Step 1. Shut down underperforming stores. During the rapid expansion years, Luckin had opened hundreds of locations, fast and without much thought to profitability. The new management slammed on the brakes. Between 2019 and 2020, they closed 578 stores, bringing the total down to 3,929. Just a year earlier, from 2018 to 2019, they had doubled their footprint from 2,073 to 4,507. The message was clear. The company was shifting from blind expansion to focused optimization. And it didn't stop there. They also pulled the plug on vending machines, which were supposed to be part of their tech-forward model, but turned out to be a flop. They slashed marketing expenses in half between 2019 and 2021, and they phased out those ultra-aggressive promotions. No more free drinks, no more 80% off coupons. Yes, that led to a drop in foot traffic, and yes, some customers left as prices started to rise. But this time, the moves were deliberate. A step back in order to take 2 steps forward. Because Luckin's new team understood something critical. You can't just cut costs and expect to turn a profit. You also have to increase revenue. And to do that, they made 3 brilliant moves. First, expand the product line. In 2019, the team realized something important. Coffee isn't just for stressed-out professionals or hardcore caffeine addicts. If they could get creative with flavor and reduce the bitterness, they could attract a whole new audience. People who normally didn't even like coffee. That realization led to what will become a game-changing product. The brown sugar boba latte, a hybrid between a classic latte and bubble tea, or as is known in China, boba. Its origin, a total accident. Luckin had hired a team to develop a new tea menu. But somewhere along the way, they pivoted and accidentally stumbled onto this drink. And it exploded in popularity. Why? Because younger Chinese consumers tend to dislike bitter coffee. But a sweet, rich, Instagrammable drink with caffeine, that's a winner. And that was just the beginning. The product team started going all in on experimentation. Teas, fresh fruit, non-dairy milks, flavored syrups, anything that could add variety and visual appeal. They worked around the clock, testing combinations, refining flavors, and it paid off. Suddenly, Luckin wasn't just the cheap coffee brand. It became fun, trendy, and different. That shift opened the door to something huge, raising prices, without losing customers. Here's how they did it. In September 2020, Luckin launched a drink called the Newer Latte, just 2 yuan more than the regular latte. Then in April 2021, they dropped the Coconut Milk Latte, also 2 yuan higher. Then another drink, and another. You see the pattern? 2 yuan might not seem like much, but across a massive network of stores, that's millions in added revenue. And here's the key. Price increases only worked because the new products were hits. People loved them. They became bestsellers. And with that success, the higher price points started to feel normal. Luckin kept the momentum going, launching 113 new products in 2021 alone. That's roughly one new drink every 3 days. And for comparison, Starbucks in China released just 20 new items that year. Why such a big gap? Because Starbucks is run from the US. Every new product has to go through layers of approval, testing, and red tape. By the time a drink hits the menu, the trend may already be gone. But Luckin, as a homegrown Chinese company, they were nimble. They could test, launch, and adapt almost instantly. That's what gave them the edge. People love novelty, and Luckin gave it to them on a conveyor belt. Let's talk about the second pillar of Luckin's comeback strategy, the brand transformation. As the product lineup expanded and prices gradually increased, something else started to shift. The brand got younger, and that didn't happen by accident. Luckin reimagined its entire marketing approach. In the early days, the company was all about hard work and hustle. The ads screamed productivity, coffee as a tool, a necessity. You would see exhausted students pulling all-nighters, white-collar workers powering through deadlines, all fueled by Luckin. The brand was functional, efficient, but not exactly inspiring. Then they flipped the script. In 2021, Luckin signed a sponsorship deal with a young freestyle skier, Eileen Gu. At the time, she was just 18 and relatively unknown. But 5 months later, she became a national icon. At the Beijing Winter Olympics, Eileen won 3 medals, the first freestyle skier ever to do so. And she chose to represent China over the United States, a decision that sparked massive attention. Luckin seized the moment. Eileen's face was everywhere, on billboards, coffee cups, social media, print ads. She was the perfect symbol of the new Luckin, representing 4 key brand values: professionalism, youth, fashion, and wellness. And it worked. Thanks to the rebranding, the new drinks, and a more emotional lifestyle-driven image, Luckin went from being China's 6th most popular coffee brand in 2019 to number 1 by 2022. Meanwhile, Starbucks was having a rough ride. A series of public scandals knocked it all the way to last place in customer perception rankings. Demographic surveys told the full story. Luckin's customer base, 19 to 24 years old. Starbucks, mostly 31 and older. And here's the kicker. Luckin's new marketing strategy was cheaper than before and 60% more effective. The result? 2022 marked Luckin's first profitable year. Let's move to the third pillar of the turnaround, franchising. Here, Luckin took a radically different approach. They made a strategic decision. In wealthier regions, open company-owned stores. In less developed areas, offer franchise licenses. This dual model delivered 2 big wins. 1, compete effectively in crowded urban markets. And 2, expand rapidly into untapped regions while making money from it. And the numbers? Between 2019 and 2022, the number of franchise Luckin stores jumped from 282 to 2,562. And franchise revenue up 222 times, from just $2 million to $445 million. That's not a typo. $445 million. And Luckin's franchise offer was actually good. Unlike most competitors, they didn't just charge upfront franchise fees or yearly dues. And here's the kicker. Franchisees only had to pay royalties if their monthly revenue exceeded 30,000 yuan. Most franchise models charge fees no matter what, even if you're losing money. Now, compare that to Starbucks. In China, Starbucks owns 100% of its stores. They don't franchise at all. Back in the US, about 40% of Starbucks locations are franchised, but in China, It's full corporate control. That means every decision is centralized, slow, bureaucratic, and inflexible. And in a rapidly shifting market like China, that's a massive liability. Luckin saw the gap and struck. They identified Starbucks' weakness and built a model that hit right where it hurt. And the result? Today in China, Luckin operates over 20,000 stores. Starbucks, around 6,500. Now let's rewind for a moment back to 2020, the height of COVID. Luckin didn't just survive the pandemic. They actually gained ground on Starbucks. Why? Because their entire model was already designed for a contactless world. All orders and payments were made through the app. Very few locations had seating to begin with. It was like they were built for lockdowns. Starbucks, on the other hand, relied heavily on dine-in traffic and mall-based locations, both of which suffered hard during lockdowns. Luckin placed its stores near campuses and office buildings, where daily activity continued even during restrictions. The results? Luckin's average store profit rose by 41%. Starbucks dropped by 46%. And now we arrive at the final twist in the saga. In 2022, the very same founders who had been kicked out of Luckin, Lu Zhengyao and Qian Jia, came back with a new company, Cotti Coffee. Guess what strategy they used? Ultra low prices. Again. In just 2 years, Cotti Coffee became a massive franchise, opening over 10,000 stores across 20 countries. For reference, it took Luckin 6 years to reach that number in just one country. Cotti claims they're different, that they're focused on Asia, not just China, that they've got new products and the new marketing ideas. But from the outside, it looks like an awful lot like Luckin 2.0. Will it work again? Time will tell. But for now, we're watching one Chinese company try to symbolically outdo another, built on the same playbook. Maybe Starbucks still has a move to play. Maybe they'll bounce back. Because the coffee war in China, it's far from over. But one thing is certain. Luckin's story is about pure survival instinct. At times, it feels like their battle at Starbucks was almost a modern colonial resistance story. Even after losing battles, even after humiliation and scandal, Luckin picked itself up, studied the enemy, and beat them at their own game. There's a lot we can learn from that.